Hi, everybody. This is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. Today is Friday, March 23rd, and I'm recording a video blog today to look at some of the astrological transits that are taking place today, over the weekend, and really in the next week to come. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm just going to annotate for you guys so you can kind of see what's going on here. First of all, let's bring the clock up to the present moment here. So we're looking at a few pretty intense transits that are happening right now. So it's good to, when there's intense stuff cooking in the sky, it's good to know what's going on, because it's very easy to get lost in our reactions to the planetary transits. Remember that in India, the planets are called grahas. One of the meanings of that word is means grabber. And there is the sense that the planets as forces acting upon us, or as symbols expressing what's happening around us and in the world, as a mirror of some kind. Either way, the planets are reflecting the things that we tend to get grabbed by, the kinds of forces and impulses and archetypal complexes in the psyche or in the environment, in the world, that tend to snag us and get us pretty caught up in dramas. Some of them are karmic, which means that some of them we have no say over. They are the fruits of previous actions from this life, from past lives, and it's their time. The fruit is ready to blossom, and so we know what's happening. We have a sense of what's happening, and yet, to some extent, it's out of our control. Excuse me, a little throat thing this morning. On the other hand, the transits are also something that there's always an opportunity to react to the transit and to create a situation that is dramatic or perhaps totally unnecessary. And so by studying astrology, we're not only trying to understand the fated elements of our life, the destined lessons and experiences that we're here to have, but we're also trying to get a handle on how to handle things that come our way and not get lost in them. So that's a good reasons to take a look when especially challenging transits are coming up. Now, the transits that we're seeing right now are pretty simple. We have there's a few of them. They're simple to understand, but they're very dynamic. First of all, we have Mercury and Venus together in the sky. Uranus not far off here in Aries. And Venus over the weekend today is entering into a square with Pluto. Okay, and then what's happening simultaneously is that's going to occur over the next 24 hours. That square from Venus to Pluto. But then, as that's happening, we're also going to see Mercury turning retrograde somewhere between about 7:39 tonight and 8:39 tonight. There'll be a retrogradation, and so you're going to see that shift and turn. Okay, so Mercury's turning retrograde this evening. Venus will be square to Pluto this evening, so it's quite a dynamic, right? Okay, so that's happening simultaneously. Think about that. Venus exactly square to Pluto while Mercury is exactly turning retrograde. Okay, not a small, that's not a small transit. That simultaneous set of events is a big deal. So now it's fast. It's not going to last forever. It lasts over the weekend. That's about it. Then it starts separating. Mercury will start, moving through its retrograde. We'll start getting used to what it feels like for Mercury to be in retrograde again. We're going to talk about that. And then the next thing that we want to talk about is, and this is a little bit, I'm just going to remove a few things to actually key in on this dynamic, because it's easier to see it if I just eliminate other things. So here you can see that over the weekend, you'll notice that the sun is at 2 degrees Aries and moving into a square with Mars and a square with Saturn. Now, that's an intense transit on its own, that series. They got both of the malefics, Mars and Saturn, more difficult symbols in our language. And what's going to happen, though, is tomorrow in the afternoon, actually, watch what happens when the sun passes into that 4th degree. of Aries. Once it passes into the 4th degree of Aries, then what I want you to notice is, here we go. The sun is now casting its beam in between Mars and Saturn. Or put another way, Mars at 4:01 casts its beam right behind the sun, right here. Sun is at 4:04, so the ray of Mars lands in a square just about a couple of minutes behind the sun. And then Saturn at 8:39 casts its ray. Well, it's actually backwards, but you get the point. So in other words, Saturn's ray is on one side of the sun, and Mars's is on the other. Actually, the way that this would really work is Saturn's ray would go up here at about 8, and Mars's ray would fall just behind the sun right here. So that's what it really looks like. But that's called an enclosure or a besiegement. What that means is that the sun suddenly finds itself stuck between a rock and a hard place. Okay, so we have the basically we have the rays of the malefics like enclosing the sun. Now we have to talk about that as well, but this is a very special and very rare configuration, and it's particularly difficult and a little nasty. So we definitely are going to talk about this one. All right, so let's bring all the planets back and go through them one by one, and that's what we're looking at as our forecast here. I'll leave out the nodes for now since we're not really looking at them. Keep the chart a little clean. It's always a good idea when you're looking at charts to try to keep the view clean, simple. Get all the lines out of the middle, no need for those. You can learn how to identify aspects without the lines. You'll be a better astrologer. Okay, so let's start by looking at Venus and Venus's current relationship with Pluto. So tonight, the first big aspect of the weekend is Venus square to Pluto while Mercury turns retrograde. So let's talk about this. Venus is in Aries, debilitated in the sign of Mars. Not her favorite place to hang out. She's a relational planet, right? Friendship, harmony, beauty, grace, diplomacy, tact, desire, sensuality, pleasure. Okay, so that's Venus. Pluto, on the other hand, is the lord of death and rebirth. So I like to use this little analogy. It's like, you go down to the kitchen one morning and you open up the refrigerator and oh my God, something smells awful, right? And maybe this has happened to you before. And you oh my God, the night before nothing. Did a mouse die in there? What happened? There's something has turned bad overnight, and that's how Pluto is. Something has reached an expiration date. Something that needs to be seen for what it is will be seen for what it is. Something explosive, dynamic, something like that is going to happen. It's as though it's a little eruptive or volcanic, but it's like something just that's been ready to rot, right? That's been ready to die, or that's been ready to change. It's ready for, it's turned bad. Something has just turned sour. Then it reaches that moment in a Pluto transit, and then it gets really eruptive and nasty. And what do? And you take the thing out of the fridge, you throw it away. Probably, if you're like me, you'll air out the refrigerator, you'll clean it up a bit. And that's also what Pluto offers us. Pluto also offers us regeneration. So Pluto's transit to Mercury is regenerative, but it's also about decay, death, degeneration, something ending, something rotten that comes to the surface, an eruption of some kind. So that's the opportunity. It's a transformative opportunity, but it's going to involve Venetian things. Venetian things involve things that we value or prized possessions, beautiful objects, friendships, women, sexuality, sensuality, pleasure, hedonistic things versus moderate things. Venus in Aries is also right about relationships and challenges, conflicts, or struggles in relationships, and things that are erupting, things that are, it's just time for something to be addressed, basically. And then with Mercury, you're thinking also about the mind and speech, and some reversal of the way we're thinking about something. Something in our minds right now is about to do a 180. We're about to turn some way that we've been thinking about things or communicating in relationships potentially. So there's also, as Mercury turns retrograde tonight, there's also the possibility for meltdowns, communicative meltdowns in relationships, or for us to have our minds changed by one another. The confrontations that we face in relationships are often ideological, or they're often philosophical. And so this particular transit might have to do with trying to convince, persuade, overpower, dominate, all different kinds of levels of power struggle, but also being open to conversion, being susceptible or open to persuasion between one another, maybe in healthy ways as well as potentially some unhealthy ways. Those are the kinds of things that are coming up. But you could also see change of style, change of appearance, something sexual that erupts, something illicit, some form of betrayal or lust. And that could be in friendships or romantic relationships. You're also looking at the possibility for women and power, the subjects of women and power, taboo subjects around sexuality or women in power. You're also looking at the potential for the attack of something sacred. Venus also represents things that are beautiful, holy, and sacred, like the adornments on the inside of a temple. It would not be uncommon to see sacred places or places of beauty that are sort of Venetian, like parks and fountains and temples and places that you think of as like beautiful places where you come together for the sake of peace. It would not be out of the ordinary to see some level of hostility or some eruption of Plutonian force to take place within those settings. As much as it pains me to ever say things like that, this is the day and age that we live in. In fact, just this morning is testimony to this. A supermarket was attacked in France by ISIS. This is Venus Pluto. It's a supermarket. It's filled with food and families, and it's a Venetian marketplace, basically. It's filled with the fruits of the garden, and it's attacked. I think I have that story right, but someone please correct me if I have that wrong. At any rate, so those are the things to look for tonight, specifically as Venus is turning retrograde. Be extra careful this evening of road rage and conflicts while driving or conflicts in transit as well, because you're going to see, as Mercury does that turnabout in the fiery Mars-ruled sign of Aries, the possibility for conflict involving travel or transit or in relationship to technology. As this transit has been perfecting, we saw this past week bombs being set off in places of mail delivery. That's Mercury stationing in Aries, sign of Mars, god of war, in square to Pluto, right? While also being square to Mars and Saturn, two malefics. So those are the kinds of things you really have to watch for, because many of us may not be involved in something so heinous, but our lives will also reflect that explosiveness and the harshness or the severity of Mars-Saturn square to Mercury. It's a broad square, but it's going to turn retrograde and back right into those guys. So we have a little season of mental, verbal, intellectual conflict ahead of us. And it's important. This is why it's so important to have daily practices, because if you have a daily astrology practice, if you have a daily meditation or mindfulness practice, if you chant, if you get silent, you're able to return to that reflective space. And it's that reflective space that brings us back to love, brings us back to patience, allows these transits to roll off from us like water that does not attach to the lotus flower. So it's very important. This is we're going through this not to amp up the drama, but to increase our awareness of the tensions in the environment so that we don't get grabbed. Okay, so, and remember, even Greek astrologers, the name for planets or stars were wanderers, and they reflected the idea of something that deviated from a set or true course. Sometimes they were even used. The word planetes was used to talk about a false teacher or a false prophet. And the stars, although they were revered as stars of the gods were a tempestuous bunch for the Greeks in some ways, and could quite easily dictate the fates of our lives, but they could also indicate forces that we were prone to get caught up in, which is what Carl Jung and modern depth psychologists tell us, that the gods have become our diseases. So we don't make room for having a relationship and recognizing these forces reflectively. Then we become possessed by them and they make us ill. So that's something to think about. All right. The next thing that's happening is the enclosure. Let's just draw that up one more time so you can see it. So those are things to be careful of, over the weekend, but today especially. And then I'm going to go forward until we'll just go over the weekend a little bit more. And now I'm going to eliminate everything but the sun and Mars and Saturn. Okay, so as you'll see, the sun is going to be sandwiched in between. You have the rays of Saturn landing on one side, the rays of Mars landing on the other. Nothing is intervening. They're enclosing the sun. The sun is exalted in Aries, right? So some things that you can think about. The sun in Aries is exalted. Mars in Capricorn is exalted. Saturn is in its own rulership. Both Saturn and Mars are also overcoming. They're in a superior square to the sun. So very powerful level of enclosure happening here. The sun. What is the sun? Impulse in Aries. Direction, motivation, action, the hero, the king, the ego, right? So when you see it enclosed by the malefics, what are you thinking? The hero pinged in by the bad guys, hemmed in by the bad guys. That's one possibility of someone literally getting pinned or hemmed in to something. The other possibility here is that you have a malefic enclosure, and you're thinking of some initiative, some direction, I'm going to go and do this, and it's blocked. It's literally just blocked. It's locked up. Now, the other one would be the certainty, the level of certainty and confidence and charisma being stifled, slowed down. You might find yourself needing to critically reflect, pause, listen, because something is impeding your progress. Something's trying to get you to listen or to stop the forward train of momentum. That's the sun in Aries being sort of hemmed in by Mars and Saturn in Capricorn. You can also think about this as a tendency to be overly domineering, willful, or controlling. You can also think about this as leaders, solar figures, men perhaps in particular, father or paternal figures going through challenges, tribulations, trials, being held in check, their integrity called into question, scandal around the leaders. Well, look at what's happening with the presidency right now. Any day, I guess, in the last God, there's just so much drama there. But there's this impending sense, if you have watched the media lately, of there's more and more people who are leaving the administration, and there's an increasing feeling of Trump being hemmed in by his own activities, and this enclosure could yield a more critical period of being checked, being brought down, being humbled for leaders like the president. So those are just some things to think about. But it could also equally represent the desire to coerce, manipulate, or try to control authority, right? So trying to coerce or bribe, or trying to, I don't like this, so I'm going to try and block it or stop it. And that can be a part of this kind of transit as well. So it really, I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but it's a pretty nasty transit. That there are some positive things, like the ability to really evaluate, critically reflect, work through a period of concentrated energy, focus, and limitation and constraint, and to find your light within a dark place is, or a tight place is, maybe part of this. But there's a kind of challenge here. There's the gauntlet is being laid down for the sun between the malefics over the next few days. When does this end? Well, it's going to end once the sun passes through Saturn, which will take place Thursday of this week. So you have like almost a full week of dealing with this enclosure, and you're just going to see it over the next week increase in intensity. So there'll probably be plenty of opportunities for me to teach on this further. Anyway, that's what I have for today. I know it's not the most lovely set of circumstances, but one bright thing that you can look for in the midst of all of this that I'll just point out really briefly, because these are some difficult transits, no joke, folks. So some things to look for that are a little bit brighter is, tomorrow morning the moon will move into Cancer, and you're just going to, over the weekend as this is happening, especially on Sunday, the moon will make a trine to Jupiter. And that will bring in some nice energy. And on Sunday or later Saturday night, moon will also trine Neptune. So you got a grand water trine going on through the weekend. So the possibility for some real deep emotional healing and supportiveness throughout the weekend. Once the moon moves into Cancer, it'll be a lot better. But remember, today's with the moon in Gemini is pretty mercurial. So be especially careful about loaded conversations, or think carefully before getting into a fight. So otherwise, roll with any changes that are unexpected, and ask the question, why is this here? Why is it here for me to learn from? Get curious about what's happening to you rather than reactive. All right, guys, much love. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.